The title of the first video in this series is The Declaration of Independence and the Bible. Watch it later for the details on the 7 categories. In our last video, we walked a linear path through history. We placed 1 Samuel 8 side by side with the 1776 Declaration, and we discovered something impossible. We found a perfect 20-point match. Every theme in Samuel found its exact partner in the Declaration. 7 categories, 20 themes, 0 gaps. God appeared in the Declaration in an undeniable way. With that in mind, let's try a thought experiment, much like Albert Einstein did. He changed the world not by looking at what was in front of him, but by asking, what if? He realized that reality wasn't always a straight line, that sometimes to see the truth, you have to bend your perspective. Let's apply that same thinking here. We were surprised to see God appear so clearly in these 7 categories. But in the Bible, God made a specific promise. He told his people that if they built him a tabernacle, he would appear in the Holy of Holies to rule and reveal himself. So here's the question. Since God appeared so clearly when we looked through the lens of the 7 categories, and God said he would appear in the tabernacle if man would build it, is there a chance that this 7-category lens is a tabernacle? So let's break this down like a logical proof. Given 1, God showed up in the 7 categories. When we applied the pattern, he was undeniable. Given 2, God promised to show up in the tabernacle. He said if you build the structure, he will dwell there. The hypothesis. If God appears in both, then the 7 categories must be a tabernacle in some hidden form. Our goal, to determine if the linear nature of the 7 categories can be transformed to match both the structure and the function of the tabernacle. The proof. Once the structure is built, we will add 1 Samuel 8 and the Declaration into the tabernacle and see if God appears just as he said he would. Let's test the hypothesis. Let's take the 7 categories and see if they can become a tabernacle. On the left, you see the linear path we walked in our last video, 7 categories in a straight line. You start at 1, move through each step, and don't see the end until you arrive at 7. On the right, you see the tabernacle structure. 3 rooms, the Holy of Holies, the Holy Place, and the outer court. We also have 2 arrows. One points away from the tabernacle into the area we will call man's world, and the other one pointing at or into God's tabernacle. This is the place God said he would dwell if man would build it for him. The question is, how do we get the 7 categories on the left to somehow become the 3-room structure on the right? To explore this possibility, let's examine the category names themselves. If we look at them closely, something begins to emerge. These categories appear to be pairs of complementary categories. The pairs look like mates that depend on each other to exist. It's as if you can't have one without the other. First, look at the ends. Look at 1 and 7, innocence and God's rule. Think about it. Innocence is fragile. You simply cannot maintain the purity of innocence without the absolute authority of God's rule to protect it. One is the condition, the other is the protector. The beginning needs the end to be complete. Then look deeper at 2 and 6, self-awareness and grace in. Self-awareness reveals the emptiness inside, the need that we cannot fill on our own. But it can't fix itself. A problem cannot solve itself. It demands grace in, the solution entering from the outside. Here, the internal hunger finds its external supply. One is the internal diagnosis, the other is the external remedy. And now, the final pair. 3 and 5, government and law. This pair is perhaps the most obvious. You don't need any special theology to see it. It is self-evident. You simply cannot have a government without creating laws, and you cannot have laws without a government to enforce them. They are mechanically locked together. One establishes the order, the other maintains it. But then, you are left with number 4, the promise. It stands all alone in the middle with nothing to pair with. That seems odd. Why would everything else have a perfect match, leaving the promise stranded by itself? Unless it wasn't meant to be a pair. Unless it was meant to be a hinge. Now look at the challenge on the screen. We know the pairs belong together, but on the list, they are separated. Number 1 is way over on the left, and number 7 is way over on the right. We need a way to bring them together. This is where the geometry takes over. Since number 4 is standing alone in the center, let's use it as our anchor. Imagine placing hinges right here on the corners of number 4. Now watch what happens when we fold the ends up. As we rotate the structure around those central pivots, the pairs naturally come together. They stop being distant points on a straight line and settle into perfect alignment. Look at them now. At the top, 1 and 7, innocence and God's rule, are facing each other. In the middle, 2 and 6, self-awareness and grace in, are matched up. At the bottom, 3 and 5, government and law, are side by side. And number 4, the promise, is still standing alone. With just the fold, notice what's emerging. 3 paired spaces with the promise standing outside. We're almost there. If these pairs match the tabernacle's rooms, we just need to adjust the lines to form the walls. We remove the hinges, they have done their job. Then we add a line at the top to close it off, and then we remove the internal dividing lines between the pairs. We're not changing the paired categories, just the walls. The boxed categories have become distinct rooms. And finally, we remove the border around the promise. That's our entrance. We have 3 rooms now, but compare them to the biblical pattern on the right. In the biblical pattern, the 3rd room, the outer court, doesn't just sit at the bottom. It surrounds the inner sanctuary. For our structure to match the tabernacle, we need to adjust the walls in this 3rd room. Watch as we expand the walls of the 3rd room. The walls are stretching up and wrapping around the other 2 rooms. We are almost there. The 2 images are nearly identical now. There is just one last line to add. We seal the top opening, and we change the header. We are no longer looking at a list. We are looking at the folded 7 categories. Let's enlarge and align the 2 tabernacles before we move on. Look at the result. By folding the categories and adjusting the walls, we've recreated the exact architectural footprint of the tabernacle. The form is identical. But as everyone knows, form is meaningless without function. Just because it looks like a tabernacle doesn't mean it works like one. So now the question is, does the function match? Do the specific pairs inside these rooms actually fulfill the purpose of each room? And do the pairs align with the spiritual reality of the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and the outer court? To find out, we have to start where the tabernacle starts, at the top, in the innermost sanctuary. At the top of our structure, we have the pair, innocence and God's rule. In the biblical tabernacle, this room is the Holy of Holies. This is the throne room. It is the place where God himself dwells and rules. In the Bible, the high priest was allowed into this room only once a year to have the sins of the nation forgiven. In other words, to make the people innocent again. This is the domain of God. It is the place where his absolute rule restores absolute innocence. The function is a perfect match. The innermost room, the Holy of Holies, innocence and God's rule. Could you find 2 better words that explain why this room exists? Next, we move down to the middle room, self-awareness and grace in. In the biblical tabernacle, this is the holy place. This was the room where the priest ministered daily. Think about the mechanism of self-awareness. It makes you aware of your own emptiness. You realize you need something from the outside to be whole. And how does man take things in? Through his 5 senses. In this room, everything is designed to be taken in. You take in the light for your eyes. You take in the incense for your smell. You take in the bread for your hunger. This is the domain of the senses. And it perfectly illustrates our definitions from the first video. Self-awareness is something inside sees something outside. Grace in is the realm change. Something outside must come in. The function is a perfect match. Finally, we move to the large room that surrounds the others. Government and law. In the biblical tabernacle, this is the outer court. This is the only place where the general public was allowed to gather. It is the place of the altar, where actions were judged, sacrifices were made, and the law was satisfied. Think about the actual process in this room. When a man knew he had broken God's law, category 5, he had to bring a sacrifice. He brought that sacrifice to the priest, who represented God's government, category 3, to offer it on the altar. The transaction is literal. You bring your sacrifice for breaking the law to the government. It fits our definitions perfectly. The rules of life were broken, and this is the place where order is established once again. And finally, standing alone at the entrance is number 4, the promise. It fits our definition. Something is coming, but not here yet. But look at the arrows at the opening. They are outside the door. In the 3 rooms, the pairs connect and work together to build the house. But Out here, they separate. You have the promise in those two arrows, two distinct directions. You have the promise that you can walk away from God into man's world. Or you have the promise that you can walk into God's tabernacle. This is the point of decision. Let's check back in with our original goal. We asked if the linear nature of the 7 categories could be transformed to match the tabernacle. The answer is yes. We have proven the structure. The fold creates the exact geometric footprint. We have proven the function. The definitions of the pairs match the spiritual reality of every room. Now we move to the final step of our logic, the proof. We must take the actual text of 1 Samuel 8 and the Declaration of Independence and place them inside a tabernacle for each. Here are the proof tabernacles. On the left, we have the tabernacle for 1 Samuel 8. On the right, we have the tabernacle for the 1776 Declaration. Now it is time to fill them. Let me show you what the fully filled tabernacles will look like. As you can see, there's no room for the full text in both documents to appear in these small rooms. So we've distilled each category's multiple themes down to their core essence. Remember, we started with 20 specific themes across 7 categories in both documents. Now we're condensing those multiple themes within each category into one core statement that summarizes the whole category. But this is just a preview. All these summaries will be removed, and we will bring them back one room at a time. But before we do that, we must establish the rules that govern our walk through the tabernacles. Remember, the tabernacle was God's house, the place he chose to dwell among his people. In the Holy of Holies, the innermost room, he sat as king and judge. For our thought experiment, let's place God where he belongs at the beginning of this story, in the Holy of Holies of the 1 Samuel 8 tabernacle. Each time man begins to speak in a room, we will add him next to God. Here's how this experiment works. God wants to dwell in every room, but he can only remain if man allows him to be God there. If man takes over and plays God in that room, man becomes the authority in that specific room, and God must leave. He must move to the next room. Simply put, man kicks God out of the room. As we fill in the summaries, it will be easy to see who stays and who must leave. As we move through the rooms, we'll track which rooms God remains in and which rooms man remains in, who's dwelling where, and who has been evicted. This isn't just ancient history. This experiment might answer one of the oldest questions people ask. If God is really God, why doesn't he stop evil? By the time we're done, we might just find the answer hidden in these rooms. The rules are established. It is finally time to fill in each room one category at a time. We start at the top, in the Holy of Holies. God is here, waiting to see what man will say. Let's see how 1 Samuel 8 started in Category 1, Innocence. Samuel passes the judgeship down without God's input. The usurping begins. Samuel replaces divine appointment with human inheritance. He places his sons in the seat of judgment, a position God never gave them. Man enters the Holy of Holies and sits down where only God should sit. By doing this, he displaces the rightful king. Now let's look at Category 7, God's rule. The people are promised a king. They went against God's input. God responds to the eviction. He tells Samuel, make them a king. It sounds like a gift, but it is actually a curse. He is saying, if you want a human on the throne, you shall have one. He grants them the human king, and in doing so, he vacates the seat of direct rule. The result in this room is devastating. Samuel passes judgment to his sons by birthright, ignoring God's appointment. God responds by granting them the human king they demand. Man has taken the throne that belongs to God alone. The Holy of Holies is no longer the dwelling place of God. It has become the throne room of man. God has been pushed out of his sanctuary. So God must step out of the Holy of Holies and into the holy place. God stands in the holy place, waiting to hear what man will do in the Category 2 self-awareness side of the room. The people are seeing the perverted judgment. The people look at the corruption of Samuel's sons. They see the perverted judgment that Samuel's own choice created. Self-awareness is working. The evidence of human failure is staring them in the face. Now the Category 6, grace inside. The people reject the warnings and demand a king to judge them. Samuel realizes what is happening. He tries to stop it. He raises his voice in this room, offering a warning, trying to bring truth from the outside in. But the people refuse to listen. They say, nay, but we will have a king over us. They don't just reject the invisible God, they reject the visible prophet standing right there trying to warn them. The result: the people don't want Samuel's warning or God in the holy place. They want a king. Man has taken over this room. God must keep moving. Out to the outer court he must go. The eviction continues. Twice evicted, God reaches the final room, the outer court. Here in this final room, he waits once more to hear what man will say. Let's look at the Category 3, government side. The people demand a king to stop the corruption. The elders gather here with their final demand. To stop the corruption, they demand a king. They are no longer asking God to fix the judges. They are demanding a new form of government. Now over to the Category 5, law side. The people are given a warning that the king will be corrupt. He will take, they will cry out, and the Lord will not hear their cry. God lays out the cost of choosing a king. The warning is clear. The king will be corrupt. He will take. And when the people cry out from the oppression they chose, the Lord will not hear. The result: they hear the warning, every word of it, but they choose the king anyway. They choose the he will take system, fully warned, eyes open. Man has taken over the outer court. God has now been systematically evicted from every room. Man fills the entire tabernacle. God takes the final step. He walks out of the outer court into man's world. The eviction of God is complete. God is outside, at Category 4, the promise. He has exited the tabernacle completely at this point. God is standing outside the tabernacle, and he looks back at the path he has walked. He was evicted out of the Holy of Holies, then evicted from the holy place, and finally evicted from the outer court. He stands outside in man's world. Out here, the promise is a tragedy. God tells Samuel to give the people the king they have asked for. But look back to Egypt, because God's people have always rejected God as their judge and king. The promise is that God respects their choice enough to let them have their king. He grants them the freedom to reject him. Now, look at where the people are standing. They fill the whole tabernacle. Man is in every room. They have systematically evicted God from his own house. In the Holy of Holies, in the holy place, and in the outer court, the pattern was the same. The people choose their own ways, and God responds to their choice. But now, look where God is. He is out here at number 4, the promise, in man's world. And remember his warning in the outer court: the Lord will not hear you in that day. It makes perfect sense now. God has been kicked out. He isn't in there to hear. So standing right here at the promise, God tells Samuel to go back in there and give them the king they asked for. Man is now locked inside the tabernacle he built. He thinks he has built a kingdom, but in truth, he has built a prison. He is trapped in his own authority. We are in a thought experiment, so let's add to it. We know God will not hear the cries for help, yet he desires to be with man and to get back into the Holy of Holies. Does God need a new tabernacle? But how can man build it? Because man is trapped inside the one he built for himself by declaring, we want a king, we don't want God. That simple theme built a tabernacle, and man is running it after removing God from it. Of course, God can't hear. He is outside and man is inside. They are walls apart. But what would allow God to hear again? We know through the lens of the 7 categories, the 1776 Declaration says, we want God and we don't want a king. But what if God hid a reversal in the 1776 Declaration? The writers thought they were just breaking from Britain, but the 7 category division reveals they were actually writing, we want God, we don't want a king. Could God use that document to show man the correct way to dwell with him? What if God built the anti-1 Samuel 8 tabernacle using the declaration, a tabernacle that allowed God to rule, where man calls on God instead of a king? Then man would be back in the same dwelling place as God. God could hear again because they'd both be inside a new tabernacle. God and man in the same tabernacle, built on God as the king and judge, not man. Can God build himself another tabernacle using a reversal of the themes we found in 1 Samuel 8? Let's find out. It is time to turn to the tabernacle that will be filled in with the summaries from the categories from the 1776 Declaration. God is standing outside in man's world. He needs a way back in. He needs a group of men to write the invitation. But these won't be ordinary men who know what they're doing. These will be blind men, men who can't see the deeper structure they're creating. The writers of the Declaration thought they were solving a political problem. They thought they were just breaking away from Great Britain. They were blind to what God was actually building through their words. And that's exactly what God needed. Blind men whose very blindness allowed him to hide his design in their document. They wrote the politics. God embedded the theology. Look at Category 4, the promise out in man's world. Read the summary. Government long established needs to be altered in order to return to the correct form of government. But now, look over at the 1 Samuel 8 Tabernacle. The decision in each room was to leave God's form of government and demand a king. So outside, God gave them the government they wanted, a king. Here in man's world, God gives the answer to fix that wrong government. He has these blind men write that the long-established government must be altered so the correct form of government can return. The reversal has begun. The writers were thinking Great Britain, but God is pointing to the starting point of choosing a king over him, all the way back in 1 Samuel 8. God has reversed the promise. And look what's happening here. For the first time, God and man are together. The blind men don't know what's really needed. They just know the old government must go and something new must come. But that's exactly what God needs them to say. Man finally agrees with God, even without realizing it. God can stay here at the promise with these blind men and also move forward into the tabernacle. They're working together now. So the next step is to head into the outer court of the Declaration's tabernacle. Let's see what these blind men say as they enter the tabernacle on the government side, Category 3. The colonists consent to protecting rights by a government with only just powers. A divine boundary is established for any government to conform to God's way of governing. Man must consent to the just powers of God. To enter God's tabernacle, the first choice is clear. Do you want to be here under God's just powers? If not, turn around, there's the door. Looking over to the Category 5 law side, the colonists write, he has. All he does is take. When we cry out, he doesn't listen. These facts give us freedom. God has them document exactly what happens when a king ignores that divine boundary. They list the corruption, how the king only takes. They list the refusal to listen. And because the divine boundary was broken, they claim their freedom from any government not meeting the just power limit. Now, look at the reversal. In 1 Samuel 8, the people demanded a king with absolute power to judge them. But here, God reverses that by establishing just powers. In 1 Samuel 8, the warning was, he will take and the Lord will not hear. Here, they confirm that he has taken and he would not hear. But instead of accepting the curse, God uses their hand to show how to break the curse of living in a man-centered tabernacle. The result in this room is clear. The only way to stop the he will take system is to agree with only just powers that come from God. God and the blind men have found their first room where they can dwell together in a compatible relationship. Both will remain in the outer court, while at the same time, God steps into the holy place to see what the blind men have to say there. So God and the blind men are 2 for 2 on the right side of the screen so far. They are in agreement, both outside the door and inside the first room. Let's see what happens as we enter the holy place now. On the left side in Category 2, self-awareness. The colonists call out for God-given equal rights for all men. They are unalienable rights. Hidden here is the source of their standing before God. These blind men write a fact. The Creator gives the foundational rights to all. They declare that these rights do not come from a government or a king. They come from the Creator. They are unchangeable rights that come from God, not from any other man in any form. On the right side, in Category 6, Grace In, the colonists are appealing to the Supreme Judge to look at their hearts. They claim they are independent now. And here, God is invited to enter. What a difference from the past. God has them write a theological invitation. They are appealing to the Supreme Judge to judge the intentions of their hearts. They aren't asking a human king to judge them. They are asking God. Now look at the reversal. In 1 Samuel 8, the people rejected the prophet standing right there. They blocked the warning coming from the outside. They refused to listen. But here, the blind men call on God to come in. They don't reject his authority. They appeal to it. They invite the Supreme Judge to look inside at their hearts and motives. The result is so different from the past actions of man. The supreme judge is invited in this time. Only he can make sure no man takes away the unalienable rights given to all men. God and these blind men are united here in the holy place. This tabernacle is filling up with everything needed for men to truly dwell with God. God and the blind men are at peace in the holy place, so both can remain here, and God can step into the Holy of Holies to see if the blind men can keep this agreement going. God enters the final chamber, the Holy of Holies. He waits here to hear what the blind men have written on the Category 1 innocent side of the room. The colonists dissolve old ties based on God's input. Everyone is equal. Hidden here is the restoration of God's original design. God has them write the correction to Samuel's error. Remember, Samuel replaced divine appointment with human inheritance, ruling by birthright. But here, God has them dissolve those political bands. The system of ruling by birthright is gone. The original design returns. All men are created equal. Now the Category 7, God's rule side. The colonists rely on God alone, asking for his input to save their lives. And here, at the very end, the throne is filled. God has them write a total surrender. They pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. To what? Not to a man this time, but to the protection of divine providence. God writes it beautifully. He was the supreme judge in the holy place, and now he enters this final room and is allowed to sit down on the throne. Everything is up to him. Their lives are in his hands. This is complete surrender to God's rule. The throne is filled. Now, look at the reversal. In 1 Samuel 8, the people said, "Make us a king to judge us." They evicted God to put a man on the throne. But here, they do the exact opposite. They step down from the throne. They place their firm reliance on God alone. The result, God is back in the Holy of Holies. This is where he dwells. In the outer court, he set the boundary. In the holy place, he judged the heart. And here, in the innermost room, he rules as king. God and the blind men dwell together in perfect harmony in all three rooms of the tabernacle. The reversal is complete. It is time to close out our thought experiment. We started with a simple hypothesis. If God appears in the 7 categories, can those categories be transformed to match the structure and function of the tabernacle? The answer can only be yes. We verified the structure. The folding created the exact geometric footprint. We verified the function. The pairs aligned perfectly with the spiritual purpose of every room. But the proof went even deeper when 1 Samuel 8 and the declaration were added into the tabernacle. Or, maybe better said, when they are added into God himself. This revealed something we didn't expect. The tabernacle didn't just reveal the essence of God's nature, it also revealed the essence of man's nature. Man's nature is to take what God has built for protection and try to run it man's way. As soon as man sees something going wrong, man tries to fix it without God. And in the end, man totally rejects God because of the problems that started with man and continue with man. God's nature is to use blind men to build him a dwelling place, a place where he can live with and take care of man in every aspect of his walk. The tabernacle is the place of that walk. It is the place where God rules and protects. These blind men can take no credit for the spiritual side of their words. Only God can hide it, and only God can reveal it. What a contrast we see when we look at these two fully filled tabernacles. On the left, in 1 Samuel 8, man has taken over the tabernacle by evicting God out of each room. Man sits in the Holy of Holies as king and judge, but really man fills every room with problems. The structure becomes a prison. On the right, in the 1776 declaration, God used blind men, men who didn't know what they were building, to construct God's new tabernacle with protections in every aspect of life. God sits in the Holy of Holies as judge and king, and he also dwells in every room. The structure becomes a sanctuary. God used blind men to reconstruct the tabernacle, but the design is God's alone. He is showing us exactly how we must enter. He is defining the terms we must agree to if we want this structure to be a sanctuary. There is only one way in, and God has revealed the path. Look at the precision of the reversal. Look at the perfection of the architecture. God had a plan to hide both tabernacles in the folding of the 7 categories. One calls for a king and no God. The other calls for God and no king. The hidden has now been revealed. God hid his design so perfectly that the writers themselves were blind to what they built. They thought they were writing a document to break from a British king, but God had them write a document to break away from the man-controlled tabernacle that was built thousands of years earlier. They were building the new spiritual tabernacle that can only be seen in the dividing and folding. In this tabernacle, there is no religion or faith or anything else man strives for. It is filled with God and his way to true life in him. You are looking at two tabernacles not built with hands, but they are built with 7 categories that act like 7 spirits, revealing God's nature in each category as they define each room. These are spiritual tabernacles, formed by words. God's words are spirit, and they are life. Life is in the declaration's words when they are divided and folded. God is there in his full glory. Death is in 1 Samuel 8's words when they are divided and folded. Man is also there in his full rebellion. Will man leave the one he has been trapped in for 3,000 years, the one that man has inherited? Life is right next door. Will you walk out of the one you are trapped in and walk into God's tabernacle? Will you walk into God's way of life? Will you walk into the Creator's creations meant for man? The one you are in now is hopeless. There is no real life in it, and what life you think you have is only a mere shadow of the real life in God. You see life and death right in front of you. You decide. What's coming in the future? Each document we've examined shows a journey, either toward God or away from him. But we're on a journey too. We are 2 videos into our investigation right now, trying to discover what all this means. But what we have seen so far is remarkable. When you fold the 7 categories, they don't just match themes, they build the tabernacle. God's dwelling place appears in the structure itself. So now the question becomes, does this pattern work on other documents? The 7-part structure, when you apply it as God leads, reveals every mistake and uncovers every way to fix them. Next, we'll test this finding again on documents as God leads. We'll look back to the Exodus story, the freedom from Egypt that God told Samuel to remember. Does it have all 7 parts, or is something missing? And we'll look forward to the U.S. Constitution, what we chose as our government after we were freed from the king. Does it complete the pattern the Declaration started, or did we leave something out? The folding will reveal the answer. More is coming. Buckle up. If God is really God, why doesn't he stop evil? Do you know the answer now? Blind men know. John 9:41. If you were blind, ye should have no sin.